We are going live with Joe Jeffrey today. Maybe. We're going to try. If it'll let me. Theo, thank you. I appreciate that. Limping along over here. Body weight's going down, but I feel like I weigh about 10,000 pounds. Oh, Joe's here. But I don't see you.
There we go.
Yeah, that's the one. We got it.
It's always so confusing how to do this.
But we got it figured out.
There we go. We're on it now. Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Or good. Is it morning for you guys?
Yeah, so it's 11 a.m. So morning still, right? Yeah.
Yeah. 11 a.m. is what you lose track when you're in prep like you are, man. Could be any time. You're just awake around the clock. I can see it in the face.
I stay busy though, so you have to. I can't imagine sitting around and just thinking about being hungry and tired.
No. I mean, you've done this a million times over, haven't you? So you know the score.
Yeah. Someone asked me the other day. Actually, they said, "How do you stay, keep your productivity up during these last weeks?" I'm like, man, I prefer. It's difficult. Like there's when you look down and don't want to put your shoes on,
Yeah.
but I much prefer to be busy versus stagnant.
I feel like when you start to let things slip and slow down, it's a snowball effect. Hey, we got a question here. What's in the shake from Cam? Big Cam. It's literally just whey and blueberries because I was running a little behind time. I literally just finished training, but I didn't have time for a meal, so I thought I'll do this shake and then have a proper meal after we're done with this.
I've actually been doing shakes almost every day in prep, which I didn't do in the past. I was always looking for that food volume in the past, whereas I've been doing a shake at least 1 to 2 times a day, and I'll do some greens powder or some fruit or something like, mixed in. And digestion is the best it's been this deep in prep. I mean, I would say my motility gets a little slow sometimes when the body gets stressed out, but man, it makes a huge difference. Like people underestimate when they're just trying to shove their face full of 3 pounds of broccoli 5 times a day.
Yeah, we've spoken about this. In fact, I think we've done 2 episodes dedicated to this, haven't we? With food seeking or food volume seeking behaviors on prep and the gastric issues that can come with that. I think it's another one of them things because you mentioned staying productive. Another thing, just anecdotally, that I find helps clients with prep is just adhering to exactly the same scheduling, down to the same food types per meal that you were having in the off season. So, if that meal was whey with cream of rice and fruit, maybe by the end of prep, it might just be a shake, but it's still the same, typical behavior pattern rather than replacing that meal with, like you say, a lean protein source and a large bolus of veggies or something.
Yeah. And I'm so limited right now that obviously even the, volume of veggies and things, that stuff adds up. But yeah, that's one thing I told myself. And of course I do eat more vegetables than I did when I was eating 6,000 calories.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not anything unreasonable. Like I'm certainly not just I'm not making protein fluff or any bullshit. You know what I mean?
That's when there's a real problem. Xanthan gum going in everything and whatnot.
Yeah, we're We're not doing any of that. Weight keeps body weight more stable, keeps digestion more stable, keeps that water balance more stable. Yeah, because you realize how that does impact your look. Uh,
Mm.
so we avoiding that. But we did get a question here. Thoughts on prophylactic use of low dose Lantus beginning and off season before carbs are very high? What are your thoughts? I don't know. Something we've talked about, but
I don't think it's gonna do any detriment. Do no evil. I don't think there's going to be an issue. It's probably just unnecessary if the pancreas isn't under a great degree of output requirement. But it's going to go in there at some point anyway. If your blood glucose can tolerate, when we say low dose, we're probably looking at that 10 IU per day marker. I would say, and there's very few people that are going to be unable to tolerate that in an off-season setting. So I like prophylactic use of basal insulin, but your drug use always reflects the needs of the scenario. It may not be a requirement, but then we get into this discussion of when is it a requirement? Is it a certain gram of carbohydrate? Well, no, of course it's not, because everybody's own genetic variability of insulin resistance and tolerance to carbohydrate. So I'd probably, err on the side of using it prophylactically early in the off season, like this individual said, rather than like wait for insulin resistance to set in and be like, oh shit, I need to, put it in now.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, at the very least, it does nothing.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, because you're going to be pretty sensitive. At least you should be, depending on what you had done prior, if there was a deficit or you're lean or whatever. So, but yeah, and when we talking dosages, like you had mentioned 10 IU, something in that range. I mean, much lower than that probably doesn't do anything, to be completely honest. If we think about what the body produces, basal insulin daily, anyhow.
Yeah, I
Totally agree.
believe there was a paper we posted on Physique Collective not long ago where it was a study. I know that you'll have seen these like endogenous pancreatic output of both
Yeah,
basal and mealtime insulin papers, and this was a normal civilian. I think the calories, you might remember, I'm sure they were like 2,200 or 2,500, but this individual was pumping out 30 units of basal insulin. So this is removing the per meal. What? But a lot of bodybuilders, other than you, don't even finish their prep that low. So you put 10 units in there, it's only going to, because it's not a negative feedback inhibitory system like the HPG axes or something. You're just going to be shaving off 10 units of your own pancreatic production, and the
yep,
pancreas
yep,
facilitate the other 20 units. So yeah, like you say, worst case scenario, doing nothing. So yeah.
yep. Agreed. Yeah, I would tend to err on that side of use if I were talking to a client in that kind of scenario. So for sure. All right. Alternatives to hormone replacement support for individuals who experience hypersensitivity to exogenous progesterone. I can take this one because I think this person follows me. So with exogenous progesterone in women, there's a couple different routes. Over the counter, you can get creams and sublingual drops. Some people put them on their skin. And through doctors, they may use cream, but a lot of the time they use micronized oral progesterone. Sensitivity to progesterone just means you're taking too much, really. I mean, here's the thing. It's like when you take progesterone, you have to understand what you're doing. A lot of your PMS symptoms around a menstrual cycle are coming from progesterone. So if we look at what it does, if we're talking about hormone replacement, the problem is that a lot of people are basing it off of like luteal phase progesterone. You don't want your levels to be there all the time because you're going to feel like you're fucking PMSing 24/7. So if we're just talking about, if you're not concerned about fertility and you're, maybe perimenopausal, postmenopausal, or you're younger and just don't care, then really we want a level of progesterone that just allows you to feel normal. Because if you're taking so much that you're replicating this ovulatory phase all the time, you're going to feel horrible. So, a good example, if you're really interested in this and understanding those mechanisms and side effects, would be like read the Women's Book by Lyle McDonald. He goes into if you're interested in mechanism stuff, he goes into that a lot. But yeah, dosing can be anywhere from 100, 200, 400. If they're really trying to like induce a cycle, it's going to be way higher versus someone that's just trying to get HRT. So I think that's the important thing, is that it's all dose dependent. Because you can't be hypersensitive. I mean, you can't be hypersensitive to a hormone that you make endogenously.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, but if you take too much, you're gonna feel like you're fucking PMSing all the time. So we did go ahead.
I think the progesterone topic is brilliant, because what I've seen is, and you'll know this, that females using testosterone is more common than ever now. Not really in super physiological dosages, in my experience, outside of high level physique or bodybuilding classes, but more so on like a hormone replacement therapy framework to avoid that deficit mediated attenuation in endogenous hormone function. And then in some individuals, especially if they're dieting, there will be a shutdown of their HPO axis function, and then you're essentially supplying the androgen and the estradiol side of the equation, but kind of leaving progesterone and just ignoring it, when progesterone does have many very important functions. So I think females that are running this kind of model, be aware, if you are going to go down the HRT route, not or just use exogenous testosterone, not every woman sees HPO axis complete shutdown of progesterone function with exogenous testosterone use, but some will. You need to pay attention to that for sure.
Yeah, so a great example is, and I've talked about this, so people already know, but Jerica's prescribed testosterone, and she has a menstrual cycle every month without taking estradiol or progesterone. So HPTA function's not fully suppressed, right? She still has some luteinizing hormone. She still has a period. And I think the key, and it is very individual, but one of the keys there too is that the higher the dose of that testosterone, probably the more likely you're going to suppress HPTA. So if it's a true replacement dose, which is very low in a female, your likelihood goes down of fully suppressing. But it also depends on where you started. Like if you already shut down to begin with, then you're probably going to remain that way. But we did have a follow-up question to the insulin. How do you manage fat intake in the off season while using Lantus?
I don't pay any mind to that.
No.
The fat thing's odd. This is a very kind of mythical bodybuilding talk, when we consider like we'd only ever want glycogen to get into the muscle cell, when realistically there is intramuscular triglyceride storage. So if you can partition dietary fatty acids intramuscularly, that's great. But then there's further complications to the fact that energy substrate utilization, depending on what activity you're performing through the day, is worth noting. It's like saying fasted cardio burns more fat, when really what we're talking about is just like liberating more free fatty acids. It doesn't mean burning body fat. So there's a bit of a discrepancy between the dietary fatty acids that you're consuming, and then automatically assuming, because you're using an exogenous insulin, that you're going to gain body fat by virtue of that. Certainly not true. And as we just described, basal insulin we're not using this in a super physiological manner anyway. We don't have this like super physiological nutrient partitioning availability from using the dosages of Lantus that we're describing here. All we're doing is shaving a bit off of what our pancreas would be producing endogenously anyway. Yeah.
And then we're not even taking into consideration metabolic flexibility differences in the off season, because in theory we should be pretty metabolically flexible when food's high. Like we should leptin levels are high, ghrelin's pretty under control, metabolic flexibility should be high. So like your body's ability to shift between fuel sources should be pretty efficient. And there's so many other things to consider. Like there's going to be overlap between energy substrates in the blood your entire off season. Like there's rarely going to be a time that you're at baseline other than when you wake up. Like you have fatty acids and glucose in your blood pretty much all day. Otherwise, maybe right before the meal, right? You're back to baseline with your glucose before you eat again. Hence, like postprandial glucose measurement. But like if you're eating in any surplus for a period of time, like this shit's overlapping all the time. It's yeah. I don't pay any attention to it. I've done both. So, so like I've done all kinds of different ratios with myself in terms of like micronutrients and stuff. Like in my last off season, I had several really high push phases, and I rotated them a little bit differently each time to see what kind of effect that would elicit as far as like matching carbs and fat calorically, more carbs, less fat, more fat, less carbs. Essentially, it just came down to digestive capacity. I really preferenced the model that I was able to digest the best. And that's where I kind of gravitated towards, which for me ended up being kind of a model because everything was so high. The model was essentially, I went the super high carb route, was like 1,200 grams of carbs at one point, and had the fats more moderate. I didn't do as good. I did okay with that, but I did get some digestive distress with that. I did better with carbs at like 700 and then bringing up dietary fat to calorically kind of like match that. And that's where I kind of fell for the most part, but that's individual, So, let's see. I don't know if we missed anything. You guys have any shows left? You got a couple, don't you?
Yeah, this weekend. Sorry, tomorrow I'm at the GPO Battle of Bedford, which is one of my favourite shows. Actually, I've been going to it for years and years. I've sponsored a class, and Leon's guest posing, so I don't have a client now. Excuse me. And then on Sunday, I'm at a NABA show. Can't remember where it is. I've got Emma Thackeray in figure, who looks bonkers. Bonkers. I don't know if you see me repost about her.
I followed both. Leon, I hardly follow anyone, but I see all your updates. The algorithm shows me everything.
Emma's nuts, man. Like her glutes are like they're feathered top to bottom. Like she's dug out like nothing left. She's an absolute savage, man. And she's one of these hyperactive, you could say, people. So like I've been hounding her all week, like, please get your steps as low as possible today. And she messaged me this morning, like, she was like, great news, I only did 13K yesterday. I was like, yeah, still too many.
Right. Just imagine when you clear that inflammation and stuff out of her. Fuck, man.
Yeah, well, I'm just carving her up, like, literally today. Well, today and yesterday, we've got through about 1,100, and I'd say she's about 70% there. But when you're just filling and getting harder, the physique just coming back to life. Because we didn't really have, hey, here's an interesting one for you, right? So the whole prep, we only made, she's like the opposite to you, we only made 2 adjustments, the whole prep.
Fuck her. I don't want to hear it.
Like, I remember we pulled 500 calories at the start of prep, and she literally dropped like 1.5 pounds for like 8 weeks. And then it slowed down a little bit, and I made 1 more adjustment, and that was it. Peeled. Yeah. No cardio, didn't change activity, didn't even have a track steps, nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. She's just a high activity person, but she wasn't intentionally hitting a mark. So
cleaning is what she blames for her shreds. Hoovering.
That's funny. It's funny that you say that, because one thing I do in fat loss phases, especially as I get further and further, is when you get so tired, you tend to slack on little things you would do in your daily routine. So things like cleaning, taking the trash out, stuff like that. I continue to do that. I don't pawn things that I would normally do off on Jerica, because I'm like, caloric expenditure, parking across the parking lot, shit like that.
Because
it matters.
NEAT is so variable across so many activities that we're unable to track, right? Like tracking steps is great. You know, I have all of my clients track steps where necessary because they would subconsciously attenuate, but tapping your foot, blinking, standing up,
Yep.
fidgeting, whatever,
Yep.
you know. So I do always say to clients, you know, pay attention to the kind of routine that you've got now, daily
Yep.
habits, and
Replicate.
you try your best to
Yep.
adhere to that, even little things that you wouldn't have thought of before, you know.
Yep. Yep. And those are things I've picked up on after this is be like show 13 or 14 that I've done. So
Mm.
you learn you learn little things along the way. And yeah, so this whole prep, that the GI, the whole digestion piece and routine piece were really goals of mine, like outside of cosmetically obviously looking the way I wanted, but makes a big
I
difference.
I saw that you've been working on your posing with Kenny. Is it Kenny that you've been working with?
Yeah, yeah.
Have you got any golden nuggets you can give me?
Huh. Um, Biggest couple things he fixed on me, and of course, again, as an individual, couple things he fixed on me. My side shots took very little tweaking. Um, my front shots took a little bit, not much. Front lat spread. My back shots, he tweaked my leg placement a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So because I have good adductor sweep from the front, but I was, flexing the glutes from the back. I was pulling and really retracting the adductor in, right?
Mm.
So I was losing all that adductor fullness. So he actually has me, which you've seen people pose like this, he actually has me push the hip out, right? And
Mm.
then flex the glute from like that women's physique position,
Mm.
right? Where the difficult part about that is pulling your glutes in. I can flex the hamstrings from that position, but like pushing out and flexing your glutes without like um, rotating
Extending
your
the hip.
pelvis
Yeah.
is
I'm just trying to do
difficult.
it in my chair now, and it is weird. Like
It's difficult.
having the hips
Yeah,
flexed, and then trying to shorten the glute and keep the hammies
but
on is tricky.
but I'll tell you what it did. It immediately brought my adductors in, and my glutes like tripled in size.
Mm.
In the visually, you know what I mean? So one thing it also did is it helped illustrate like that shelf on the glute and that tie in or in that lower part of the glute where it inserts back right, by the hamstring. So
Mm.
so that was super helpful. Once I got the legs down, it was like another thing we did is we brought my stance in a little bit closer and turned my
Mm.
toes way out, more quad sweep, stuff like
Yeah,
that.
that's something I really like the look of the close foot placement on
Narrow.
rear shots. As long as like if your lat inserts here, I really like to see the VL align with the lat.
Yep.
If you've got good adductors, you can get away with it well, like yours as well, because you can kind of cram them in and then
Yep.
hit the lat. It's just such a better X frame. There's nothing worse than having a huge gap in the middle with really
Yep.
widespread feet, you know?
It just makes it, man, it just makes it just like blows out the whole lower body. Like it looks so thick compared to what it did with a little bit wider placement and retracting. Um, the compromise is the glutes, which I don't really think is a compromise as long as you're lean enough.
Mm. They'll
I
still
think if you're lean enough,
Yeah, you'll still see full separation on stage, even if you
yeah,
don't do hip extension.
yeah. I think as long as you're lean enough, I don't think it's really much of a compromise. In the front shots, we didn't change much on the side. We didn't change much in a little bit in the front lat, like making sure we actually, one thing we did, because I have kind of long limbs, arms are kind of long, brought the hands instead of on the side, brought the hands into the line of the adductor. So like brought my hands around the front of me instead of on the side of me,
Mm,
like this.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that actually filled that arm lat gap in, right? Someone asked
Yeah.
actually, can you post the old way and new way? Yeah, Chris. So if you go on my Instagram, there is a back comparison actually from probably 2 weeks ago that I posted. Look at it. You'll see in the old pose, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. That's from 2018 or 19, and then you'll see the leg placement in the after.
That way you're talking about hitting the front lat. It's funny you say that because at the Arnold, I was looking at Shane. You've probably seen Shane, like his front lat is the craziest shot
Yeah.
ever, man. It's crazy. And I was thinking, how is he getting that width? Because, you know, you just stand still. He doesn't have like the widest clavicles. And it's the way he was kind of digging his thumbs under his ribs, but you know where his lats would insert, which is where most people are grabbing. But it was like front on and then scooping up here, like you're mentioning. I
Yep.
was like, oh shit. I've never
Yep.
thought to hit it like that. It just filled in everything around the lat entirely.
Yep. And it's one thing that I did in the rear lat is I was able to open up just fine, but once I hit the leg placement with the hips out, it was hard to lean back far enough, right? Because I'm basically in a hip hinge, but then I'm trying to bend at the waist, and so it's like right. So it's
Extending
difficult,
the spine whilst in
right?
hip flexion.
Yeah.
Seems weird,
So
yeah.
one thing that helped there was when I bent back, I basically just crunched down on the abs, and that helped me rotate like this. Someone asked too, I missed who you're working with on posing. Kenny. Yeah, it's Kenny. Yep. Kenny and I. So funny thing is I remember when online posing, he was basically the OG of there's people in the gym. If you wanted help with posing, you went to your gym, right? And you found the bodybuilder in the gym or the judge or someone that could help you pose. But I feel like he was probably one of the, if not the OG in terms of like the online space, doing FaceTime and Zoom and stuff. I could be wrong, but he has to be one of the first ones. So plus he travels to a lot of the big shows too. So then that way, I think if you're a national level competitor, it is helpful, or a pro, helpful to find someone that maybe be at the show for touch up posing and stuff in person. I think that's helpful.
I've seen that firsthand, man. This year's the first time that because a lot of my clients work with either Leon Pierce or Rye Brambleby as posing coaches. All of my classic clients will work with those guys because they are the guys for posing here, and they're always at the same shows that I am. And the difference I can make backstage, even in just the client's confidence. Yeah, you're hitting that bang on, man. It looks great. You know, even just those words from posing. I think people are turning up to the show knowing whether or not they've nailed their physique for the most part. I think the biggest concern is the presentation on the day, handling the nerves. So to have the posing coach there, absolutely invaluable.
Yep. Yeah. When you're talking optimization, you're talking national level, pro level, things like that. I mean, we're talking minutia is what's separating these people in terms of result. It's not at a regional show. If you're a national level guy, you're probably going to walk into the regional show and you can pose 50% correctly, and you're probably going to sweep it, right? Just because you're so much better than everyone. But at that level, I think everyone will benefit from it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you know who's the best example of what you just said? You know, Will Bassner, Porridge Gains on Instagram. His posing Will, if you're watching this, I'm sorry, man, but your posing is dreadful. It's some of the worst men's physique posing I have ever seen. But he still just wins everything just because it's an unbeatable physique. In fact, here's a lesson. He competed a few weeks ago and he got second. And I spoke to all the judges and they all said he would have won it if his presentation was better. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. And, of course, at some of those, you have to hold the poses longer, or they make you hit them multiple times, stuff like that. So it's definitely important. I think too, when you competed so much, you get kind of lazy in terms of practicing because you've just done it so many damn times, and you're like, man, I know everything. I've probably put more into posing in this prep than I had in my last 5 preps.
I feel like its rank of importance and I'm not sure why, has it might be the popularity of the classic class maybe, but seems to have definitely this year cranked up. And another thing I've noticed this year, a lot of shows that I've been to, because the classes have been so competitive, the competitors have really been worked hard for a long period of time. And then you're seeing who's posing fit and who isn't, which is a skill in itself. If you're being ran through mandatories, I remember at that IFBB show, which one was it? Regional qualifier. It might have been the MK Classic, but class 2 bodybuilding. It was like 20 minutes on stage on mandatories.
That's brutal. Brutal.
But some of them you could tell. Some of them you could tell they've been practicing. They were holding. It's hard, and some of them were just gassed, midsection gone. So
yeah.
It's definitely worth practicing.
Yeah, I see. I'm trying to. I know that the posing conditioning is good when I'm like not sweating when I'm posing. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, I'm not even hardly because Kenny generally will do like a 30-minute session, and granted, we're not necessarily, we take little spots, he'll correct something, I'll go in again, but we're hitting a lot of shots, and I'm like, if I can make it through the whole 30 and I really don't even break a sweat, I'm like, okay, we're getting, that conditioning is improving. So,
one thing that might be useful for anybody watching this that's in prep or starting prep is, in the last couple of years, I've used posing as an expenditure tool. So just like on my Google Sheets where I'll have steps and, low impact cardio, whatever, I'll have posing.
Set a posing goal.
Yeah, and we'll progressively overload it as needed through the prep, not only for the presentation practice, but it's, anybody that's posed hard, like you just mentioned, like you are sweating, you are gassed. It's a difficult activity. It's definitely a fairly high level of expenditure, certainly higher than just walking around. And if you work that up to like 20 minutes of running your mandatories or even routine practice. So I normally split it into the two. It might be 4 rounds of mandatories and 30 minutes of routine practice per day or something like this. Right. So it was quite a chunk of energy expenditure.
Right. And it tends to be the women already do this because women fucking pose to themselves to death during prep. Mm-hmm. Like they'll only have 2 poses. You have bikini or wellness. I've got like 2 poses they need to hit. But dude, they practice that T-walk 17 million times. They don't tend to lack too much in that realm. Which is funny because they have the simplest posing.
Mm. And, I've noticed in women, especially the bikini class, they study the art of that presentation as well. I know Jazz was looking at pageant competitions, how they walk, things like this, who poses like what way, which way to hit that, over and over again. I remember where we used to live, she rented the pub next door just to have space to walk around, up and down, to run that walk. Yeah, so I think the classic class, a lot of the classic class, in fact, a bit of a dichotomy in the classic class. Some of the posing presentation was beautiful, and some of it's dreadful. So, and you notice the difference, right?
I think in classic, some people try to overcomplicate it.
Yeah, they try to too fancy.
They try to over dramatize the posing. They try to make it so dramatic that you're missing the fundamentals of the pose.
Yeah.
Right.
Or the speed. The speed of posing is important, not rushing your transitions. Letting the judges actually see what you look like. First in, last out is a good rule.
One thing judges have told me multiple times was too much unnecessary movement. They don't like that. So like, transitioning in poses and moving your arms and hands and doing all this shit to an extreme degree that annoys them. They don't like it. Yeah. That's not the pose. So it's important to have a transition, but don't take 10 seconds to move into the next pose and then only hit the pose for 3 seconds.
Yeah. Get there first, ideally.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to lag, but What else do you guys have going on? Anything good?
Well, we got Texas coming up, haven't we, man? So we fly out the 1st of December. So I've got a little bit of a break, basically. I've got this weekend where I'm away at shows all weekend. Next weekend, it's Australian Nationals, so I've got competitors there, and it's also the WBFF Nationals in Australia next week, so I've got to get that out of the way. I don't know if you've got any Australian clients, man. They're difficult, man. So I'm checking my clients at 9:30 my time, PM, 2:30 a.m.
Time zones suck.
and then 5:30 a.m. So you're like, right, I can't do anything this weekend. And I had to do it a couple of weeks ago when I was also at British show Saturday, Sunday. So I went to the show on Saturday and then I had to be up at 2:30 in the morning to check client in, and then went to another show the next morning. But anyway, 2 more weeks, and then I've got a few weeks until we come to Texas. So, and that'll be me for the year. It's essentially the end of the season here. So I've just got a few international ones, and then we'll break over Christmas.
Yep. Yeah, we have nationals is the last is December 3rd. That's really the last big show for the year. And there might be something after. There might be some regional shows after that. I'm not sure, but that's really the last one for the year. So it'd be it.
Do you know what I want to know? Here's a really typical bodybuilding question, but I want to know your answer. Who's your top 6 for the Olympia Open?
That's a fair question. The winner will be the same.
Yes.
I think anyone that disagrees, I think that's silly. I mean, anything can happen, but I think he'll win.
Dude, have you seen the photos of Big Ram?
Fucking what the fuck?
At like 3:30, and I'm sure, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure he was like 270 on stage last year. We're talking 60 pounds heavier. And I know he's not stage lean now, but I mean, he can't be more than 12, 15 pounds off. You know, the man's going to get on stage 40 pounds stage weight. What?
Yeah, it's madness. It's not even close, really. So, and structurally, he doesn't. I mean, structurally, he's good. Like, he doesn't really have wide hips. I mean, he doesn't have a tiny waist, but contextually, like based on his physique, his structure is beautiful. You know,
is really interesting. Since he got away from oxygen, his physique has progressed ridiculously.
100%. Yeah.
I wonder what that's about. You know, oxygen is meant to be the greatest thing ever. Why is he progressing so much more now? Who's he working with? Is it Dennis James? I might be wrong.
Dennis. I think it's still Dennis. I think so. He trains with Dennis at least. I know I've seen that, but I don't know about nutrition. I'm not sure. Probably Dennis. So
is it Chad?
That's one. Maybe it's Chad. Maybe it is Chad.
I think I've got a feeling it is Chad. Now the rest, from 2nd to 6th, this is where it's interesting because I feel like it could go so many ways.
Who got second last year? Did Curry get second last year?
Oh, I can't even remember. Yes. Yeah.
And then third was Hottie? No.
I'm sure it was.
Did Phil do it last year or the year before?
Year before.
It wasn't Phil. So I think it was Hottie. And I truthfully think it'll probably be the same top 3. I think Curry will get second again. I don't think Hottie surpasses him because I just don't think I don't think he improves enough. And structurally, it's just maybe too short. So I wouldn't be surprised if 1, 2, and 3 are the same. I think 4, 5, and 6 get pretty interesting.
Where's Nick placing? I think
some people are like, he gets second. I'm like, nah,
I think he could be as high as second and as low as not even in the top 6.
I think you're exactly right.
Yeah.
I think that Nick gets 5th. I'm just going to say 5th. I think that...
does he beat Hunter?
I think
See,
the only thing, I think the biggest thing that Nick will, that definitely will beat Hunter on, I think that he may be more conditioned
yeah,
than Hunter, like a little sharper, a little grainier. Um, Hunter structurally, Nick's lower body, his waist has some photos make it look like it's better. I don't know if that's the case, but it's really his lower body and his shape of his legs that just from the back it's crazy, right? Because he has that thick adductor, and so in the rear double it's sweet, but from the front it's just awful
yeah.
looking.
It's very weird vascularity that skews his separation quite badly.
So that I think that hurts him. I think Hunter maybe is a little more appealing to look at. Hunter's midsection has maybe regressed a tiny bit as he's gotten
Yeah,
bigger. Not a lot, maybe slightly. It's hard to get bigger at that size and not grow your midsection a little bit, though.
he's had I know he's had a lot of GI
I know.
issues
Yeah,
in the off season.
he should hire me.
He should, man, because his diet is hilarious.
Get that
No
shit
offense,
fixed.
no offense, Hunter fans, but like when you're watching him on YouTube and he's going like, my digestion sucks, my appetite sucks. It's like he's drinking chicken shakes and then just whey and Rice Krispies. I don't think he
We
ate a
can
single.
fix it, man.
Ugh.
uh, Here's a question. Here's one for you. So where does Andrew place? And
So I've seen Andrew recently in person. You know what? He's freaky, man. He's even better in person. He's freaky. His lines are unreal. And you can't forget, like, didn't he only turn pro last year or something crazy? Like this
yeah,
guy
you were too.
flown up. But I think it's George Farrell that works for him, isn't it?
I
I
believe
think
so.
because Arnold's like, there's no denying he was good enough to win it because he's so freaky, but he was soft. Um, But I think that can be a very positive thing for him, and potentially they've planned it this way to just have him diced at the Olympia.
Right.
If he is diced at the Olympia, he's going for second, man. He's going for second.
You think his back is big enough?
Uh, what about Bonac?
Fourth, Nick gets fifth. Hunter gets sixth. Is that our top six?
Who gets second?
Brandon.
Is he doing it? Oh yeah, he is doing it. Yeah, I didn't even have him in top six. I don't think.
Rami, Brandon, Hottie. Rami, Brandon, Hottie. Who did I just say was fourth? Bonac,
Oh, okay.
Bonac, Nick, Hunter.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I can agree
Now,
with that.
one that shakes up that whole thing is either Nick drops way back, or maybe moves up, and then Andrew gets in there. I don't know that there's anyone from like 6 through 10 that's going to sneak in though, unless I'm forgetting somebody.
I think Andrew is a favourite to get second.
I think he could, yeah.
He is ginormous, and his midsection is ridiculously small. His lines are unbelievable, man. Like, if he could come peeled, if not this year, then next year. I don't think anyone's ever beaten Rami until he retires. But if not this year, next year he's in that top two.
I'm looking at the list. I want to see if I'm missing anybody.
That's a good idea. Let me pull it up.
Uh,
I don't think he's even coming close.
there might be
Samson.
there.
How have I forgot Samson?
Sam's, yeah. Okay. I'm looking at the list. Yeah, Samson's on there. Nathan Diash is on there.
I don't think Nathan's going to do it, man. I don't think Nathan's
No,
doing
fine.
it.
Blessing.
Yeah, bless him. Derek
Oh,
Lunsford.
fuck. Derek Lunsford. Where's okay, so here's the question. How much bigger are Derek Lunsford's quads in open?
You know what? He looks absolutely insane. He's one of my favourite bodybuilders at the minute, if not the favourite from his proportions. But I think you stand him next to these guys and he just gets eaten alive.
Where did Sean Clarita place in the Open?
Oh, God.
Oh,
Wouldn't even like to say. Where does Blessing place, man? He can't even be top 10.
nah, I can't. It's so deep. It's so deep. I would have a hard time putting him in the top 10. Maybe
Isn't it an
10. I don't know.
interesting year, though? I think the first Olympia year we've had in a while where, other than first place, like, it's going to be really exciting.
Because then you have, in that like 10 slot, you have guys like Akeem and James Hollinghead and those guys who will all kind of flop around in that spot. So like someone like James, he could be 10th or 16th. So
Let me text her. Again, James is one that I've seen in person recently, and I promise you, his Instagram photos do not even do him 1% of justice. See how grainy he is in person.
believe
It's
it.
unreal, man. It's that pure, nasty grain that you can't get on a photo. Man, at the Arnolds, he was, them old black and white photos of Dorian. It was like that,
Yeah.
man. Like thin skin grain was awesome.
Yeah. You've got that second half of the pack. There's so many. There's like you've got Charles Griffin, you've got Hassan, who will probably be soft.
We got a question here. What if Crizzo qualifies? How would he do? I don't think he gets a
Yeah,
look in there.
he gets smoked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Odd physique. That's the only way I can describe him.
He's big. He's very round, but he's not structurally like most muscular is good, right? Because you can kind of just cram everything in there and you can't really hide it. Like front double's not good.
No, put together strange.
You imagine his front double next to Lunsford's front double.
Smoked. Absolutely smoked.
Well, it's not going to look good. Yeah, so it'll be interesting. It's going to be interesting for
That's
sure.
the Olympia rundown.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's all I got for today, sir.
No other questions on here. I
No, sir.
I got a question in my Ask Me Anything that I don't think I got to cover yesterday that we could cover here for the last 10 minutes. There was a question I asked, and then there was a follow-up question that I think is interesting. So the original question was basically asking about what level of conditioning to bring for bikini. And then the follow-up question was, how do you determine this between specific federations? I think this is a really good question because it's even deeper than that. What I've noticed across European shows, being at them, watching who's on the panel, and then being in shows in England, and then looking at shows in America, is it doesn't go by the criteria necessarily. And I think this could be a podcast in and of itself. We could maybe get a judge or a competitor or a bikini competitor in here, because the criteria states they don't want striations, they don't want muscle fibers visible, they want separation, they're not after vascularity, they don't want deep dug out glute ham lines, right? But what the criteria says, some judges do want that and do favor that. So I think it's gone further than just trying to get as close to the criteria as possible. And I think what competitors are going to have to start doing is following the line of who's on the panel, what do they favor? Like, for example, the two Yamamoto shows, the Italy show and then the France show, like I'm pretty sure that was the same panel. So you could have watched the Italian show, see what they favor, and understand that that's the kind of look to bring to the France show, rather than this is what the criteria wants. And then it's even deeper than that. So this is where bikini is so complicated in the fact that you'll be judged as according to who else is in the class. So
Right.
Your conditioning might be super conditioning, might be not, who you stood next to. And the judges are judging you against that. Man, bikini is tough.
Yeah. It's pretty well known in the US too that it's like if Steve Weinberger's the head judge, you want this. you know, if someone else is the head judge, you want this.
You could maybe let me know if I'm wrong here, but from what I've got studying the US as compared to Europe, and I don't know how closely you follow the European shows and whatnot, is they definitely favor more muscularity than Europe or Britain. There seems
Yeah.
to be a tendency towards that, whereas that tends to get marked down a little bit more across the European shows, I've noticed. Do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Totally. I noticed that. Um, and if you look at the Olympia, I don't know the exact stats on this, but I feel like bikini normally has an American winner. Well, no, that's not necessarily true. It has quite a few times, but um, it's going to be interesting. You know what's going to be more interesting than that is let's see how out of hand wellness gets in the next
Yeah, that's
2 years.
another good point. It's yeah, it's going to be absolutely bonkers. I'm thinking like the Belgian blue cow style
Dude,
cloth ham
it's
glue.
fucking, dude, I've seen a great example, like some of these fucking good, like Renee Jewett and
Oh yeah,
shit like that. Like, fuck.
yeah,
Like the fucking lower body, it's like, what in the fuck?
yeah. I mean, I love the wellness class, but I don't know when I'm going to start not loving it and going, that's a bit,
There's going to be a point. There's going to be a
yeah.
point where it's just like, what in the world is that?
It all seems to come back round in the end. Like we were just talking about bikini, is like, well, when Issa got the Olympia, it's like, oh shit, like it kind of changed. And the next year was very much more of a slimline look from that muscularity climb. I wonder if something similar would happen with wellness there, where it would just get bonkers and then come back. It didn't with men's physique though, did it? Or it at least
No,
hasn't.
fuck. Men's physique's crazy. Dudes are
Dude, I was
huge.
stood backstage at the Arnold, was looking at these guys like, holy shit, that is open bodybuilder size.
I know. You know when they look that big, just standing there relaxed with their
Yeah.
arms out, they look like they're just blown up. I'm like,
Yeah,
what?
it seems that it's just become about a structural thing rather
Yeah.
than a specific look to a criteria. It's like structurally, if you have that real sort of wrapped in oblique line and huge clavicle width, it's like you can go in there even if you are the size of an open bodybuilder.
Yep. Yep. I've noticed that.
Sweet. Yeah, that was my only question
Cool.
then. So I think we're good.
Cool. All right, man. Well, thanks for getting on today. I'll repost this for anyone that wants to watch it. So we'll get it, put it back up.
Good shit. Thank you everybody for
Talk to you
watching.
guys soon.
Peace out.
Later.